Okay, are we ready for the next one?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. I don't know. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of PandemFlick Vodcast. Welcome back. If you haven't heard our past episode, I want to give you a little quick rundown of what this show is. This is a show where your hosts take a deep dive looking at a number of influential films across history that have covered in some way the theme of a viral outbreak or a pandemic. And we, of course, are recording this show during our own global pandemic, and all of your hosts are coming at you from their quarantine bunkers.
In various degrees of infection.
Yeah, that's right. So welcome to the show. And before we dive into today's film, I do want to just briefly introduce our hosts. First up, we've got Adam Harum, the man behind the web series Done Better, and of course an award-winning filmmaker, and he's going to weigh in on our films with his knowledge. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And of course we have Isaac Joslin. Isaac Joslin, of course, the twisted brain behind the SacCast Movie Pod, which is currently defunct but may rise again in another form. However, there's roughly 3.5 weeks worth of listening out there on the interwebs, and what better to do during a pandemic than to catch up on a great podcast. So Isaac, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Don't listen to anything before 2014.
or just pre-cancel him and then listen to it.
I'll get so canceled.
And also joining us, we have Clancy Bundy. Clancy Bundy, a jack of all trades, involved in all the projects I already previously mentioned, on top of course, being a very talented artist who's out there posting his work all over social media. You can find him on Instagram at Scribbles with Clancy. Clancy, thank you very much for joining the program.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm here to bring it down.
It's such a noble cause you serve.
Burn it from the inside.
And I am Adam Boyd. I'm a professor of film at Eastern Washington University, and welcome to PandemFlick. Today's film was curated by one of our hosts. In fact, it's a film chosen by Clancy Bundy. So Clancy, I'm going to kick it over to you. Have you introduce what film we'll be discussing today? Give us a little background and maybe a quick plot summary as well.
Okay, well, this movie I didn't see when it first came out. It looked like garbage, and I was right. But when you're struck with a pandemic and you're asked to find a bunch of movies to submit for a screening, you can't not include the 90s movie I think ever to exist. I think it's
the 90s movie to be released in the 2000s.
Yeah, super 90s. It is Cabin Fever. Starring the guy from Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World, yeah.
Yeah, he was a bad boy.
Sean.
We should clarify, it's Eli Roth's Cabin Fever, which is from the early 2000s. I know they did reboot this film.
Yes, Eli Roth was involved with that one too, so just to make things more confusing for us. I don't know. This movie's garbage, but I've only seen it twice.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah, I've only seen it twice, but it might be a great pandemic movie because it is very visceral in that regard about the way pandemics can outbreak and the way viruses
Spoiler alert,
work.
it is not.
Yeah. Apparently Eli Roth got the idea for Cabin Fever when he developed a skin condition, and so he wrote the script. Took 8 years to make the film. It feels like a student film. It feels like something like thrown together that way.
I mean, I have syphilis, but I didn't write a whole movie about it.
Yeah. The film shut down after one day of filming.
But you should.
Let's see. What else about it?
Well, what's the basic plot-ish?
Oh, hey, Isaac, just shut up. I listened to you rant for 30 minutes about a shirtless man. Shut up. So anyway, this was supposed to be the promising debut of a new filmmaker, Quentin Tarantino, called Eli Roth, The Future of Horror. He's been kicking around in all sorts of movies that prestigious people make. Peter Jackson really liked this movie. It turned a huge profit, but it's just bad. And it had a ton of spin-offs and sequels. So anyway, I figured if we're going to do a podcast about pandemics, we should definitely include this one. It is a story of some kids who go to a cabin in the woods and then can contract some vicious Ebola-esque disease that just causes their skin to necrotize. Oddly enough, it doesn't turn out to be the biggest problem that they're dealing with somehow. But yeah.
The biggest problem they have to deal with is their own fucking stupidity, I feel.
Yeah. So that's basically the movie. Bunch of stupid, dumb kids go out, and then they are brutalized by a virus and the surrounding society. Yeah, that's a
perfect
summation.
Great, thank you, Clancy. Will
you see how I got that done in 5 minutes, Isaac?
You did. That was very clean, crisp, nicely done.
I didn't hold it up with a bunch of personal opinions just snuck in.
Now that we're at cruising altitude, let's torpedo this plane right into the ground. We're gonna go over to Isaac and.
Well, excuse my fucking eloquence, Clancy. Jesus.
Isaac,
you have to start with Adam because you let Adam go before me on the last one, so that's just the order.
Okay, all right. The order is set in stone then. All right, I was going to go reverse this time, but all right, Mr.
I think
Harum.
you were trying to stoke the fire. No, I'll talk about this movie.
Yeah, so tell us what you thought, and then also how the pandemic or viral outbreak theme kind of plays out in your mind in this film, and if it's done well or not.
Gotcha. Okay, got it. Okay, so right off the bat, I started very much just hating the movie. I enjoyed watching it, but only because I made it all the way through, and that last 10 minutes, which I'll get to, helped fix some of the problems I was having beforehand. Something I've always talked about on mini podcasts and in person is I enjoy when a tone works really well in a movie. I feel like tone is very, very important to enjoying a film and also being able to establish themes and tell the story you want to tell. If you're not like very aware of what the tone of your film is, to an audience member, that becomes very clear very quickly. This movie was all over the place. I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be actually scary or a horror movie, if I was supposed to be laughing at the really shitty jokes, if I was supposed to be like, are these people really this stupid? Why are they not acting like human beings? Or is this supposed to be extended comedy? And because I had to question that at every step along the way, it made my viewing experience very frustrating and aggravating, because no one acted like a human in this movie, and it wasn't played for comedy until the back end of the movie. So I have a theory that I'll get to, but basically the overall problem I had was I had no relation to the characters. They were all shitty human beings. They had no regard for each other, even when they tried to establish it. They're always like undercutting what seemed to be their own like arcs within it as they went along, as well as just like fulfilling the worst kind of cliche, you're a jock, which means you go shoot squirrels and drink beer and laugh about it. And that, at least he had a character. Everyone else, I didn't know what was going on, because it's like, he's either the nerdy guy that wants the girl he's been pining over, or he's the guy who gets all the girls, and he's both. He's like, well, let's just fuck. We're in the middle of this pandemic, right? I guess I have no scruples anymore.
All three of them are like archetypes. There's the jock, the strong guy, the smart guy, and the nice guy, and how all three of them are terrible people. Like,
yeah, I guess, but
the girls don't have any characters. The girls are just
not at all. Well, the girls are there so that Eli Roth can do a really slow motion shot of their ass every once in a while. Like that whole shot. Like you can't even see what she's looking at. It was
to
like,
be
God
fair,
damn.
that was a direct rip from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh well.
That's my biggest thing about this movie is it's like a smart dumb kid made a movie.
Yeah.
It's like it's a smart like guy who on paper knows everything and knows what he's referencing, but he's a douche.
Yeah, that's kind of what came across. Everyone just seemed like a douchebag. And then I do have a theory that I feel like the editor at the end of the movie finally said, fuck it, this is a comedy. And from the last 10 minutes, it suddenly became funny to me. But it wasn't until those last 10 minutes. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, like, the pacing of the editing seemed to speed up.
Yeah.
The way
it goes
like
much
jokes
faster.
played.
Yeah.
The way that like he actually found shots of like funny reactions.
Yeah.
I was something like, is this a different movie? Like, what is why is it the last 10 minutes I'm enjoying, regardless of the rest? But even that didn't make up for like the mess I had to get through to get there. And so it just seemed very amateurish in a way that Clancy was describing of like, I've seen a lot of these things, so I'm going to put that all together, but with no intelligence behind it and just being like, this is funny, haha. And you can tell, like, when Eli Roth shows up in person in the movie, he makes this really shitty, intentionally shitty joke that falls flat on like 3 or 4 levels because the characters themselves think the joke falls flat, and then the editing falls flat, and then the joke itself falls. So it's like 4
It's a triple threat
of like comedy failing, showing you how
Roth
terrible
special.
of a filmmaker he is, and you just sit there like, and so yeah, it was frustrating, and I enjoyed hate watching it. And then the end, I was like, oh, okay, if they'd done this, maybe for the rest of the movie, I would give it credit. But again, I feel like weirdly that comes from the editor rather than the filmmaker's vision.
Gotcha. So how does the portrayal of the actual virus and the pandemic play out for you? I mean, does that hold up, or does it fall apart just like the rest of the film?
It falls apart in the same fashion. I would thumbs down on that too, because is it fleshy things falling off of them? Do they go crazy?
It's shit in the water, like, and it makes.
I guess I don't know. I just.
It's Ebola, and it contracted through blood.
It didn't matter.
Contact.
It didn't matter to me. I guess is the problem. Is like that seems so secondary to me hating everything the characters were doing that I didn't really.
We're
give a
talking
shit
about pandemic movies, about diseases. Jesus
But
Christ! Do you watch Looney Tunes and you're like, man, I don't get behind this. And the
there's a scene
work.
where I'm supposed to be creeped out by her shaving her own skin off, like shaving her legs. But all I could think about was, if you cut yourself shaving and you're pulling skin off, why do you continue to shaving?
She's in shock. Like, she's like, my skin's rotting away. This is terrible.
When I touch a hot iron, I don't grab it with my other hand to see. Like,
why do you touch a hot iron?
To feel something.
I don't know. It was tough for me to get behind, like, the way that the virus worked and how it like spread around because of how much the other shit bothered me.
So for you, this is an infected thumbs down all around.
Yes, yeah.
All right.
And the fact that it spawned like all of these sequels and spin-offs, and because
that's
people
outside of bounds.
Okay, fine. It's a down.
Okay,
down.
Infected from Adam Hurams. Thank you, Adam. All right, we're gonna go to Mr. Joslin. Isaac, where do you stand on this film, Cabin Fever?
Yeah, fuck it. Fuck this movie. I hated it. Like, Eli Roth was like 30 when he made this movie. If he made this movie when he was like 22, I'd be like, okay, he's got a little flair, a little panache. He's a sociopath. Most 22-year-olds are. Okay, maybe he'll do something good in the future. But no, he was a fully formed, ostensibly human being. And I was like, what? This is like high school shit. He is what everyone accuses Quentin Tarantino of being, which is just a blatant plagiarist.
But outwardly so, yeah.
And with no real vision of himself. Like, Tarantino borrows stuff from other movies, but mixes it together like a DJ into something fresh and new. You know, he's like a sample artist that's really good at it. Eli Roth is just like, I saw Evil Dead once, so I'm gonna kind of do that, but also use some shots from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
He's like, the duck's gonna shoot at people with a gun, and then he's gonna die by a gun. That's ironic.
But I honestly get this like creepy amorality from Eli Roth, where like I'm convinced from watching his movie that he is an awful person. like. In the same way that watching the Boondock Saints convinced me that the director of that movie was a terrible person, and then I was vindicated when I watched the Overnight documentary about the making of that film, which everyone should see. It's amazing.
And then
It's
you see his character in Death Proof, and that's like the same guy, date rapey, creepy. Let's get them drunk and take advantage of them, guy.
Yeah, and
which is exactly what was in this movie. Like,
the creepy thing about Eli Roth is, I think that's as deep as his thinking goes. He's like, date rape's funny. He's a kid with a magnifying glass killing ants, and he never grew out of it. I think he may be a serial killer.
You heard it here first on our podcast.
I say that as someone who thinks that Sallow 120 Days of Sodom is a great film.
Just Google that one, folks.
Yeah.
You'll figure out the analogy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I went to film school with a person that you guys know. I won't say name names on the podcast or whatever, but I remember he would just make movies and scripts about just like gross torture and stuff, and people would read all this shit into it and be like, oh, he's saying this about this, and this is a commentary on this. But when you talk to him, he'd just be like, oh no, it's torture's cool. I like it. Like, I remember I had a conversation with him. I'm a big Takeshi Miike fan, and Miike often gets criticized for being one of these, sociopathic weirdos that just revels in debauchery. But a lot of the time, I think you can defend his movies are defensible as from a humanistic standpoint. I think he actually has empathy for his characters. But he made a movie called Imprint, which I think is really just kind of a cavalcade of debauchery for debauchery's sake. And I was talking to this kid about it, and he was like, yeah, did you see Imprint? I was like, yeah, I was kind of disappointed in it. There wasn't really much depth, but he's like, yeah, but the torture scenes were like, the special effects were so cool. When they tore off the fingernails, it was awesome. That's fucking Eli Roth. I don't think he's an empath.
Well, but
I think he has a trail. I think he has a trail of broken ex-girlfriends behind him.
But let's bring this back.
This movie makes me think he is a bad person.
Cool. We're talking about movies about viral outbreaks.
And that is handled poorly in this film too, because all of the the water is just pumped into the house unfiltered from the lake.
Yeah,
and then
hilarious.
No, it's in a reservoir. It's in a reservoir.
Well, if I had an inkling that was supposed to be funny because of the negligence of the bureaucracy that handled the water or something, I'd be like, okay, that's good.
Right.
That's
right.
Yeah.
That's a George A. Romero move. That's like real satire. But I don't get any of that in this movie. At the end, when it's implied that the pandemic was going to go beyond this little, Camp Crystal Lake area, they just put the water into a bottled water truck straight from the lake, unfiltered. There's regulations for that shit.
Right.
I remember a lot of
I don't know.
Wait, is that just getting pumped out of the reservoir directly into their tap water?
It is. That's
Actually,
what it says.
What's even great is there's not even a pump. I mean, the camera follows the entire pipe, and it's apparently just some sort of magical force.
Pneumatic.
But to let Isaac kind of put a bow on his review, as far as the flesh-eating disease goes, how do you feel that's handled in the film, and does it have any merit, at least as a presentation of a pandemic?
It's too vague.
Says the guy who brought a vampire virus to the fucking table. Jesus
There's
Christ.
rules for that, you piece of shit. They don't.
there's not.
You know what the disease is doing to them in this movie. It's super vague. It's okay, it kind of makes their skin slough off, kind of.
Yeah, everybody does.
And then they vomit blood, and also they have just blood comes out of their orifices.
It does gross stuff. It's a gross stuff disease.
It's a gross flesh-eating virus.
It's a gross stuff disease.
But
when you look it up on WebMD, it's just gross stuff, and it's you have the
category.
Fever.
It's a category.
You've got the cabin fever.
Have you guys ever seen? Not a sidebar, but it is a sidebar. You ever see Muppet Treasure Island?
Yeah.
There's a scene where they're hanging out on the boat.
Have we ever seen Muppet Treasure Island?
And they're hanging out on the boat, and the guy stands up and he screams, "I have fat cabin fever!" And then this really bad actor stands up and goes, "I've got it too!" That's all I could think about throughout this movie, because that one chunk was more entertaining than the rest of what I was watching.
All right, Isaac. So the disease is too vague. So it sounds like you're in line with Mr. Harum. This is infected. Thumbs down across the board.
I mean, if vagueness, if vagueness was kind of the point, I can see that. Like, I like super abstract movies, but this, I don't feel a guiding intelligence behind this film that is worth paying attention to.
Ouch.
Oof. I saw your eyes roll there, Clancy.
All right.
It's a movie about a dog that bleeds on a dude, and then the dude falls in their water supply, and then everybody in the town contracts a disease. Pandemic-wise, it's an A+.
All right. We've got two infected votes here, but I'll step in. I also thought this movie was terrible, but I enjoyed every second of it. I think I had a little bit... This is actually my first time viewing it. I had never seen it, but I'd heard a lot about it. It had been this... And actually, in doing research for this vodcast when we were launching it, this film showed up on almost every list I could find of, like, great outbreak films. So to me, it made sense to include it. And Clancy suggested it, and I actually think it's just fun to have a turd movie for us all to shit on the turd. But anyway, that's a different cultural thing.
Joke's on us. Eli Roth is a successful filmmaker. So this launched a fucking career, and it pisses me off.
And that is something I do want to bring up, because I think that is bizarre. But overall,
so it launched a real pandemic as well.
Overall,
the real pandemic is the Eli Roths we made along the way.
Overall, this film is schlocky at best. It's just so poorly put together, and
but
for me,
it's good schlock.
It's enjoyable because it's so bad. For me, this falls in that realm. And the way I heard about this was I had friends who would have annual cabin fever parties where they just get together, get drunk, and then just hilariously laugh at how bad this film is. It was just
Those
like watching...
should be on a registry somewhere.
It's just like watching The Room. It's like going in and watching just like ineptitude at a level that is unfathomable and just, laughing at it. So I think that's why I enjoyed it. I was just blown away by how bad it was and enjoyed it. I mean, there's so much... It's exactly what both Adam and Isaac had said. There's a feeling that it's a farce, but there's never any sort of intelligent framing for that where the jokes make sense. It's lacking anything that would make you say, "Oh, this is clearly a humorous commentary on this, or some sort of dark, twisted deconstruction of this." It's just not there. What it is just like really bad filmmaking, and it's just it's kind of like it's like those YouTube videos where bikers or skateboarders get hurt. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of...
Those are great. Those are awesome. Yeah. I'd watch 10 hours of that before I'd watch this movie again.
But so I enjoyed my experience, and I just kept thinking it was incredibly bizarre. But there are elements of this that, on Clancy's defense, that I at least think it does clearly, from beginning to end, at least hold the pandemic to an extent at its center. I will agree that like the symptoms kind of vary, but it ultimately, I would say the pandemic is it's sensationalized gore. I mean, that is the disease. It is just whatever gross stuff I can fit into my movie. It's the result of this virus, right? So that is what it becomes. And the movie does just kind of spiral downward into Adam's theory of like the editor just said, you know what? I'm just going to make this funny. Like, because it ends with this whole thing it's set up in the beginning of the film, which is just a really dumb joke about the N-word. When that happened, I was like, oh, that's what this film was all about. It's just a 90-minute exploration of a bad N-word joke.
That was what was weird. That was the only that was the only setup and payoff in the entire thing.
It's fascinating. So I would probably watch this again, but I'd have to be under the influence of a lot of drugs or alcohol to at least endure it. But I enjoyed the experience. I will in no way say this comes anywhere close to what I would envision you could call a movie. But what I think is the most bizarre thing is this did launch a career for Eli Roth. And there is nothing in this film, I feel, even if it was poorly made but had some sort of spirit or heart within it, where you would think as maybe a more seasoned director might see it, like Peter Jackson, and say, hey, I think this kid's got moxie, like I'll give him a shot. There's nothing in this. I think I agree with Isaac 100%. I would watch this and go, well, whoever made that is a fucking psychopath. They should probably be in jail.
There's a conspiracy theory that David Lynch was interested in Eli Roth's trajectory.
Well, originally. Eli Roth worked for Lynch, apparently.
Yeah.
And he was like a shadow producer of this movie and then severed all ties the second he saw it.
And to go off of what Isaac said, I feel like this is just Roth aping a lot of Lynchism without understanding what that is. So like
Kung Fu Karate Kid out of nowhere. And
it feels it's like a weird echo, a reflection of things we recognize but actually aren't there or have no substance. Which, I don't know, maybe on a weird, broader level, it's worth studying of, like, what would happen if a psychopath made a movie, like, someone just devoid of human connection at all. Like, that's interesting. That could be a case study, but...
We already have books about Ted Bundy. It's fine.
But he never made a movie, like Eli Roth has, so we have something to look at.
Well, right? And, like, on another level, there's this movie, and then the next big one was 28 Days Later, as far as infection being an antagonist in a movie.
Right.
Like, that's the reason it's one of the only movies where a guy's like, I'm gonna make a movie about, he had a skin infection. He's like, I'm gonna make a movie about kids getting fucked over by a skin infection, and that's the movie he made, and it was a huge hit. Like, so as far as a pandemic podcast,
no one is. Well, I shouldn't say no one. Clancy, I'm not knocking you for the film choice. I'm glad you made it. I think this has been incredibly entertaining.
I think these two guys here on the left are like trying to call it a good movie, and I'm confused by the rhetoric.
No. So I will say on my vote for the pandemic, I'm going to give this an overall. It's definitely infected. This is so far infected. Burn it, right? But in terms of the pandemic, it introduces enough interesting imagery, and what I like, the one thing I like about this is because these characters are so devoid of empathy, it does make for some interesting conflicts, because when their friends start getting infected and gross shit starts happening, no one gives a shit about anybody else. Like, they're willing to put the girl who gets infected, they just throw her in a shed and they're like, you'll be fine, and we're gonna slip you some waffles, you'll be fine.
There's a hard cut between, like, he's like, I love you, you're my girlfriend, like, from the 8th grade, and then he's banging another girl, hard cut to his other girl in a shack bleeding out.
Just letting her rot in a shack. I mean, there's something...
And the way the police handle the infection, they're like, just take him out back and shoot him. And the guy takes him, kills him, and puts him in another water source. It's like, there's ideas in there that are interesting and fun.
Well, but they're all ripped off from movies that did them correctly. All the cop shit is straight Romero, from Night of the Living Dead, or a movie that we're going to talk about later. But it's understanding the aesthetic without getting any of the point behind it.
Yeah. I mean,
okay, I will say the one gag that did work for me in this movie is when the fucking Boy Meets World kid, whose name is Ryder Strong, by the way.
Yes.
Okay, so I hate that guy now. But when he's like, there's like a gross decomposing body in the water, and he's climbing up a ladder to get away from it, and it snaps, and he falls on the body. That was the one point in this movie where I was like, ooh, gross. That's.
Oh, see, I laughed really hard because he like worked so hard to like poke the body and then ends up falling in. Like, there was no reason.
That's the thing. It's like funny and gross, and it works in the way that like Evil Dead 2
It's
does.
like he wanted to see if that was the guy they burned.
Yeah.
And then they did the music cue like, he was burned, and you're like, we saw he was burned. That's the same coat. Like, why are you all so stupid?
My favorite part is when he's like trying to find help, and he can't not look at a like he does, like he walks by a window, and he just starts perving on a naked lady, and he like fucks their whole chance.
And like he just walks away from the help getting caught as a peeping Tom. He's like, well, I guess we were meant to die.
Did you find anybody? He's like, did you find anybody? No.
Yeah. See, and again, that's all great ideas of like. His sexual drive literally animalistically fucks him over, but it's not the theme, and it's not his arc at all. So it's like, oh, there's a cool idea in there. Oh, you fucked it up. But yeah.
So to go back to Clancy's to give this validation why we discuss it, there is a lot discussed in here about like once it becomes aware that there's a sickness, the characters do at least react a little bit. They're worried about getting in the car because it's covered in blood. They're worried about there is at least like the characters do show concern or fear about
There's
the
a
virus.
Lot of virus stuff in the movie.
Yeah. So I mean, it is. So
I know they don't turn white inexplicably overnight with their head bandanas on, and then suddenly change allegiances. For this
podcast, what we should have done is made a bracket. Tournament, because I think Clancy really wants Omega Man to go head to head with Cabin Fever.
As far as which one's about a virus and which one's about bullshit.
No one is disagreeing this film does contain the idea of a virus, Clancy.
Good. I just want to make sure that's clear.
So, but
it's like Sharknado, Jaws. They both got sharks. What's the problem?
So. It was a resounding infected thumbs down from us three, but I do think there's some merit in here, definitely about discussion of the virus. But Clancy, I want you to close out about your final thoughts on this film and kind of at least why you felt there are some worthy things to discuss on how this film handles the idea of a pandemic.
We really want you to think about what you've done.
I'm not going to be shamed for bringing a virus movie to the table for a virus podcast. I'm sorry I didn't take it for a metaphor and bring in the Omega Man or goddamn Planet of the Apes. But no, the only thing
the new
Planet
of the Apes trilogy would work.
Shut up. This movie sucks. There's no debating that. The only interesting thing about this movie is the gore and the fact that it's a flesh-eating virus that's communicable through touch and fluids. There's like Isaac was saying, if there was a smarter, more capable person behind the wheel of this thing, the way that the police react to just cover it up, to just kill the kids, to burn all the bodies, there'd be some interesting discussion happening, but there's no one with any brains behind the wheel of this thing. So, yeah, I'm not defending Cabin Fever.
You go right to hell, Clancy.
I grabbed the most basic, easy, low-hanging fruit for the pandemic flick, and that's what this was.
We needed it. This is what's going to hook people into watching the rest of this series. Is just us.
Isaac's angry face and is like,
why?
Absolutely.
He won. Isaac, why are you so mad? This movie is infected, whatever that means. I don't know why you're so mad.
I can't unsee it. I've watched.
You've seen it before. What? I didn't bring this to you. You had the herb.
Seen it before.
You hadn't seen this before?
No, I had never seen this movie.
Oh,
I had avoided Eli Roth movies because I read reviews.
And now he knows the truth.
Yep.
Clancy, let me ask you.
I usually am.
Let me ask you, Clancy. Does this film survive for you, or is it also infected?
Yes, it survives. It's a movie about a virus that eats people's flesh.
Okay.
It is the one waypoint between whatever came before it and 28 Days Later, which is actually a good viral outbreak movie. Like, I
guess in a way,
Outbreak was in there somewhere.
When did Slither come out? Couldn't we just call Slither that movie?
No, because Slither wasn't a box office hit, and it didn't. No,
what do you mean? It oh, that was 2006. All right.
Yeah. So this was before Slither. Yeah. This is 2002, correct? This film? I don't think we ever said the year. Yeah, 2002.
I don't do that kind of research for this movie.
That's okay. Neither did Eli Roth, so it's fine.
Damn it.
I was going to submit Slither, but I'm already doing Night of the Creeps, which is the same movie, essentially.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And that's a good little tease for upcoming episodes.
See, that's a respectable Clancy choice.
I'm not here for your respectability politics, Isaac.
I give
Say please and thank you, Clancy.
No.
I give Clancy's choosing this film a thumbs up. I give the film. I don't even raise my thumb for this film, but
yeah. They look up at Caesar, and Caesar's like, "What?"
All right, so it sounds like it was very clear that this movie is a big ol' stinker, as interesting perhaps as it does present some ideas about viral outbreaks. But you should be the ultimate judge. If you haven't seen the film, you should go out and check it out. And if you have seen the film, let us know what you think. Do you think it's a good film? And if so, tell us why you're wrong. So leave a comment on this video, or send us a letter by carrier pigeon. I don't know how people are communicating these days, but I do want to thank our hosts for joining us and for enduring cabin fever. Adam Harum, Isaac Joslin, and Clancy Bundy. Thank you very much for participating in this episode of PandemFlick, the Vodcast. We will be doing another episode, so be sure to tune in. And a great way to keep up with what we're doing is to do all those great YouTube-y things, the whole like and subscribe and follow us and start a fan club or whatever you people do out there.
Smash that bell so you get updates.
Smash it, yeah. So and be sure to just keep up with us as we continue to release these episodes. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode of PandemFlick. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay alert.